For our second podcast, Professor Horst Hutter will be discussing the spirit, Thumos.
My topic today is what the ancient Greek culture called Thumos, which is normally translated as the spirit or spiritedness. I will follow this translation, even though there are other possibilities. Thumos is mentioned more than 700 times in the Homeric epics, and it is a part of the warrior self, one of the most important parts of the warrior self, that is often conceived as, for example, in the discourse of Achilles, with his own spirit. Now, I will present this in terms of a modern multiplicity psychology, in accordance with which the human being is a conflictual multiplicity, with one sense a war and a peace, a herdsman and a herd, with a profound vision underneath or something that guides him, and this is manifest in at least two parts of the human condition. Last time I spoke about Eros as one of the most important parts of the human soul, something that cannot be completely ever eliminated or defeated, even though religious dispensations have tried to do so. But the other part, equally important, is the spirit, that which we can use to guide us in life, and that which we can use in order to contain and tame and guide and lead our erotic desires, among other desires. Now, the spirit is something that is extremely important. It is to be conceived in terms of two alternative possibilities. The spirit could either tend towards the rage and anger side, or it could tend towards the anxiety and fear side. Now, it is important to distinguish here fear and anxiety. Fear is always being afraid of a specific threat, such as when someone walks in the British Columbia forest and all of a sudden confronts a grizzly bear, he or she will be afraid. But anxiety is a permanent condition of fear, which is frequently inculcated by a cultural conditioning, especially by a religiously informed cultural conditioning. It is that which human beings are supposed to feel in the Christian form of religiosity, in terms of striving for salvation in the eternal life. Now, one of the problems of modern humanity is both a disaggregation of spirit, a weakening of the spirit. We have in the modern society very many anxious people. We have people who lack spirit, who get lost in all kinds of appetites, searches for money or drug cultures, etc. And then we have the reaction against this in terms of dictatorial regimes that start wars. Stalinist dictatorship and Hitler's dictatorship are equally potent manifestations and organizations of the spirit in its aggression and warlike aspect. Now, how can we use the spirit? In this respect, I would like to go back to Platonic psychology, and I would like to mention a metaphor, an allegory, from the Plato's dialogue, the Phaedrus, in which he says that the human being is like a charioteer on a chariot in front of which are two fiery horses, each with its own appetites, each with its own vision of the world, and with the goal that it wishes to pursue. There is on the one hand the dark horse that wants to satisfy the basic appetites, including of course erotic appetites, but not only erotic appetites, and that in order to do so needs to search for money and power in the service of the satisfaction of appetites. And then there is the other horse, which is a white horse, spirited, that wants to serve the erotic appetites, but at the same time wants to go beyond and realize the human condition. Behind this metaphor of the two-horse chariot, there is then the human mind, the human intellect, which sits as the charioteer and is to organize the combined voyage of both horses, the spirit and the dark horse, the erotic horse. Now, how is this to be achieved? Behind this vision, this allegorical vision of the human condition, is an understanding of the human being, which postulates that the human being is by no means finished. That is, we have barely moved beyond the animal stage, the ape stage, and we are on the way to realizing our full humanity in the modern understanding of Nietzsche, for example. This full understanding, this full vision of the human being is to be achieved in the Übermensch, in the Hyperanthropos, in the overhuman. But of course, the vision of the Hyperanthropos, the overhuman, was already present in antiquity, both in Plato and in early Christian visions of the realization of what it means to be fully human. Now, given this fact that we are not finished, we are not complete, and we are in the position of the drivers of two horses that want their own things, that do not want to follow, but the energy of both horses can be used against each other in such a way that we can organize a common pursuit and move ahead into that which we will choose to do. But what do we choose? How do we understand what is our task? And here every individual is different. There is no such thing as a common human task, but there is of course a political order in which we have to fit and in which we have to organize our vision of the good life as we see it, our own good life. Now, in order to understand this, we have to think of the human being as a kind of a trajectory, an unfinished trajectory. Whether or not this is linked to any kind of immortality, we do not know. Of course, in terms of both Muslim and Christian and Jewish understanding, it is linked to an eternal life, but it doesn't have to be. We do not have to assume this, even though this is a very satisfactory mythology which informs the striving of the two horses. That is, it postulates then a correct erotic regime and the enforcement of that erotic regime, a correct regime for the satisfaction of appetites, for food and every other appetite, then is to be enforced and imposed on the dark horse by the horse of the human spirit. It is the spirit that formulates goals, that searches for the vision that comes from deep within, and it has to be something that comes from deep within ourselves, which we follow in order to understand what we have to do in our life, right? How we have to live right here and right now. Now, there are various possibilities. of philosophical self-shaping that are available. Philosophy here is a way of life, a striving for self-perfection. Now, when we look at history, we have several models of self-perfection, several models that the spirit can imitate. There is the famous model of Socrates, as presented in the Platonic dialogue, for example, in a symposium, the spirit of Socrates. There is the vision of Jesus. Jesus is one of those models. There is the Buddha. There is Lao Tzu. These are all spirit models that the spirit can imitate in searching, in realizing him and herself. It is very important to understand the whole history of the spirit, because largely the human spirit has been male-centered, and it has been something that is important in warrior cultures. But it need not be. Women are equally called upon to realize themselves. Women also have a spirit which they have to use in order to understand and realize themselves and guide their second horse, the dark horse, in the right direction. Now this means, of course, that the human condition is a struggle. We have to face the fact that it's not possible to live a human life without suffering, and we have to be ready to accept that suffering. We have to make an extra effort. We have to be aware that we may not succeed, but the spirit is called upon each time to see what is happening, what am I doing wrong, what am I doing right, how can I maintain my vision of myself in a continuous project. Now, the forms of religiosity that we have in existence, these are visions that serve as models for many billions of human beings to realize themselves. But this is something that can be done automatically, and the religions are facing nihilistic dissolution today. Now, the problem then becomes, how can we find a philosophical understanding of the human condition that fits the modern age and that can serve as the guide of the modern spirit? And here we can, of course, we have the wonderful history of human philosophies. We can use Plato, we can use Aristotle, we can use Epicurus as the fundamental guide in the trajectory that we can assume in our spirit. Epicurus is a wonderful project because it teaches us that we can look to search for pleasure, but not every pleasure is choice-worthy, nor is it possible for every pleasure to be pursued. So we have to choose among pleasures, and we have to organize our lives in such a way it's perfectly adequate for human beings. Now, the search for pleasure, of course, could also mean studying, it could mean hard work, it could mean the acceptance of struggle, the acceptance of suffering. Another possibility is the Stoic school from ancient antiquity, and of course the various religions. Now, since the religions are engaged in nihilistic disintegration, we do have to find a new kind of philosophy as a way of life. And in doing so, we have to organize our spirit now differently. Not just in the warrior sense, but also in a sense of peaceful self-harmonization. That is my discourse on Thumos.
Thank you very much, Professor.